Up. So welcome. We are going to be recording this session, and Sandy will put some links and things into the chat shortly. I'm really delighted to have our new VPR, Ellen Fisher, with us. Ellen joined us on February 22nd, so and still virtually finding her way around. We hope soon she'll be able to add physically finding her way around campus, and comes to us from Colorado State, where and Ellen is a chemist at Colorado State. She was also department chair and associate vice president for research. She has an extensive and highly lauded research career, has funding from pretty much every types of funding source you can have, and has done a lot of collaborative and team-based work, and along the way developed an interest in team science. And you'll probably hear a little bit about that today, but you can hear more about it in the Team Science Conference that the Grand Challenges and Interdisciplinary Science Co-op are sponsoring in about a week and a half, where she's giving one of the keynotes. So I'm delighted to have Ellen here with us to talk about developing research and scholarship plans. And with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen.
Thank you, Julia. And I am going to share my screen. And as I do that, I am going to give a little bit of a caveat, just because a lot of the stuff that I'm going to say today is really aimed at more junior faculty. I know that there are research administrators and more advanced associate professors, et cetera, on this call, or at least that signed up to be here. And I just want to point out that I think that the things that I'm talking about today, I think you could pretty much do at any point in your career. And I think it would be helpful. I hope it will be helpful. But there are some places where it's going to sound like I'm aiming it specifically at early career investigators, and that's because I am. So with that, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes telling you a little bit more about myself, and then get into this idea that I came up with when I was asked to do this about vision boarding and what that means. So okay, a little bit more about me. And this is really, I decided I was going to do this on purpose to put in here. This is all stuff that you would probably find on my resume or somewhere if you went to look about me. But I want you to think about it in terms of how you get things done as a faculty member. How do you actually accomplish things? And so if I just, my research interests, as Julia was saying, are in chemistry. I was a gas phase chemist by training. I've moved into the world of materials. So now I'm a materials chemist, and I'm really materials agnostic, which means I study a bunch of different kinds of materials, whether it's polymers or materials for solar energy or catalysis or nanomaterials or whatever. I've been working in that area for a long time. Also, I've done some work in chemistry education, as well as the science of team science. My funding experience, again, as Julia pointed out, I have been funded for my research in a variety of different ways: federal funding agencies, state agencies, different foundations, private industry, and also regional centers. I've graduated 21 PhD students and 7 master's students since 1998. I've had more than 50 undergraduate researchers in my lab. I've written more than 150 peer-reviewed journal articles. I've got an H-index of 42. I've had several invention disclosures. I have one startup company, and I've gotten numerous awards. And I'm also, by the way, an ACS journal editor, and I manage over 600 manuscripts a year. And I don't put this up here to try to intimidate anybody or to say, wow, look at me, look how great I am. But I think that one of the things that for my whole career that I really try to get focused on, what do I need to accomplish, and to try to put something concrete associated with that. And so in part, what I'm hoping to do today is to share with you some of the tips and tricks that I've come up with over the years that may help you to stay focused and to stay on point to have a very successful career. So things that aren't on my resume, I put this together. I've been showing it to various groups. I've been in various faculty meetings and other areas, and I just want to show you that besides what's on my resume, there are other things that I like to do. I have a picture here of my dog and my husband, who are my home office coworkers. And then some other things that I think are kind of interesting, and I'm happy to talk about all of those. I do like to garden. I like to cook. I also like to read and drink wine and be up in the mountains. I really enjoy my students and my family. And I can, again, like I said, I'll talk more about it, but think about this in some respects. This is my own little personal vision board that I put together just so that people can know me a little bit better when I'm introducing myself in venues like this. But thinking about vision boards, here's what I found a couple of examples on the internet about vision boards for 2021. And this is a bit basically for those of you who have not heard about vision boards. They became popular about 10 or 15 years ago. Oprah Winfrey made them very popular because she said everybody should do a vision board. And so the idea is that you just take things and magazine cutouts and pictures and inspirational quotes, and you put them on a board, and then very positive things will happen. So why make a vision board for your career or for your research program? And the sort of thought behind this, as I said, was that what we focus on expands and becomes our reality. And by having images of what you want to achieve, that may be able to help you achieve the goal. So, if you think about this from the standpoint of your research, or your academic career, you can say, well, I want to write a book. So you could say, I have a picture of I finished my book. If you're interested in applying for NSF or NIH funding, you could have something up that reminds you that you need to get on that proposal writing. Graduating students might be part of it, publishing in major journals. Your teaching and service is also really important to have on there. And so you can see how this might be effective for helping you be more successful in your career. Now, I will say that this is sort of based on this, the law of attraction, which really isn't a law. And as a scientist, I kind of balk at the use of this, but this is sort of that idea that again got floated out in the popular press around if you just think about something, it will come to you. So if you say, I really want to be really rich, if I just think about making more money and really have some intent around having more money, then somehow it's just going to magically appear that you're in your bank account. You're going to end up with a lot more money in your bank account. And same thing for other things with respect to what your outlook is. And there's not a whole lot of science specifically around the law of attraction being particularly effective, but it turns out that there is neuroscience behind vision boards. So I've looked up a bit of this to kind of tell you, and as you might imagine, it's a little bit controversial, and you kind of have to pick and choose what you're going to focus on to say, yeah, this is really effective or not. But the pros of doing something, an activity like putting together a vision board, there is some neuroscience behind it. First of all, your brain is constantly filtering all the information that's coming to you from the world around you. And essentially when you create an image or create a vision board, what that does is create the filter by which your brain can look at different things that's coming at it, and you say, oh, this is important, this is not important. And so basically you can imagine that what's going on is that your vision board is helping to imprint the important things on your subconscious to essentially serve as that filter. And one of the things that you can think about that I've heard, and I think it's true, that for example, women who are pregnant often say that when they look around, all they see are other pregnant women. And that's because, of course, that being pregnant has become a really important thing in their lives. And so then that becomes a filter for your brain, and you automatically see it. The same is true, for example, if you decide that you're going to buy a new car, and then all of a sudden the cars of a particular manufacturer that you're interested in become the only ones that you see on the road. And so there are things like that there have been a lot of studies around, and it's quite well documented, I guess is what I would say, in the literature. In addition, visualization, this is also an interesting fact about your brain, that your brain can be fooled. And so in some respects, there are certain studies that have shown that there's little difference between something actually happening and a strongly imagined vision of it. And I've recently heard on a podcast some stand-up comics talking about having created a story and changing details of the story to make it a better joke, if you will. But then they start to think, well, wait, did that really happen that way? Or am I just, misremembering this? And so if you continue to tell yourself that something is a particular way, then it might be that way. I like to say perception is reality. I think there's some truth to that, but really it's about visualizing what you want to have happen, and that can help. Okay. Stress reduction is also can also be achieved using things like vision boards. Repeatedly looking at images can help overcome that. Our brain says, "Oh, there's something new. I've never done that before. It's kind of scary. I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to set it aside and say, okay, I'm not going to go after that. I'm not going to apply for that proposal or do that, write that paper or whatever, because it's new and it's scary." But if you repeatedly look at images about the thing that scares you, it can start to reduce that physiological response that your body has to stress, and then allow you to take healthy risk and embrace opportunity. Positivity is another one, that creating a vision board can provide a brain energizing positive space. If you spend some time actually putting one together and really thinking about all the positive outcomes that might happen, then you get endorphins released in your brain and everything. You get happy. Okay. And again, I'm going to put a big caveat on what I'm talking about here, in that I am not a neuroscientist, but I have done a little bit of reading on this just to kind of come up with if there was real evidence in the literature for why this might be a positive thing to do. So there is some. Likewise, there also are some downsides to thinking about using vision boards as a way to manifest what you want to see in your life or your career or whatever. So it turns out that really we need to be talking about not vision boards so much as just a vision of an outcome, but rather an action board. And so it turns out that just visualizing the outcomes doesn't really work in terms of achieving what you want to achieve. You have to really think about visualizing how you're going to achieve those goals. So one example that I took out of the literature, this was really interesting, that students visualizing how it feels, like, how do you feel? How is it going to feel when you make an A on that exam? They didn't actually do better than if they actually thought about when, where, and how they were going to study for the exam. So I have over here on the right, there's actual data from this study. And the kind of interesting thing is they have in yellow over there is the control group, who were asked not to think about or visualize anything about the exam. So they were the control group. And then there was one group of students that they said, we want you to really focus on how you feel, how you're going to feel when you make a good grade on the exam. And then the data in green is from students who were actually asked to visualize the how they were going to get a better grade on the exam. And the interesting results from that, in my mind, were that the process imaging students on average got 12% higher marks than the controls. And they worked a little bit harder, but they worked longer. They put in more hours than the students who were asked to focus on the outcome, but they actually were 3 times more. They got 3 times higher marks. So that's an interesting result. There have been a number of other studies around athletes where they're visualizing the training process, as opposed to just how's it going to feel when I win the race. It's like, if you visualize how you're going to actually train for the race. Some other issues that have been brought up again by various groups are that, thinking about if you put a goal on your vision board that's really only achievable by one person, it's perhaps not realistic to say, well, I want to win the Nobel Prize. So if I put the Nobel Prize on my vision board, the probability that I'm actually going to win the Nobel Prize, because it's only given out to a maximum of 3 people per year in chemistry, then then that's probably not terribly achievable. And so then I could be setting myself up for failure. The other thing that people talk about is that vision boards don't really often focus on the obstacles. And that gets back to that visualizing the how, as opposed to just what the outcome that you want to see is. So you need to also be planning for those. And then I thought this was an interesting one that I read in one article was, thinking about if you don't achieve a particular goal, if you have a goal, maybe that's a blessing in disguise. Maybe that really wasn't what you were supposed to be doing with your life, or maybe it wasn't really the best goal. And so maybe there's something else out there that may be better than what you were visioning. So I want to just point out, I want to give both sides of the concept of a vision board. And I'm going to transition us to thinking about this also as a 5-year plan. Okay, so vision board as a 5-year plan or a career plan is really where I'm going with this, and just to conceptualize that idea of vision board. So with that, I'm going to move us to thinking about the going to the Jamboard. And I've put the link in there a couple of times. I hope everybody has access to the Jamboard. If you haven't used a Jamboard before, it's kind of a fun, it's like a big whiteboard, electronic whiteboard. And I've got one that I've made. There's the link to it. It also should be in the chat. And the idea is that the way to do it is there's a sticky note icon that appears on the left, and you can put a sticky note on the board. We tend to say use whatever color sticky you want, one idea per sticky, and it's okay to duplicate somebody else's idea if it's up there. And you can resize and edit by moving things, and then you can change pages. And our vision board today, I think, has 3 pages. You can change the pages using the symbol at the top. And I've kind of highlighted over here. If you can see my arrow, it's up at the top. So with that, I am going to move us to this question, because as I just said, I'm not sure that vision boarding is exactly the way that we like to do things in the STEM disciplines. I'll tell you, it's a little bit too crafty. Crafty, it's about a craft, and I'm not really artistic. I'm a scientist, and I have trouble, with glue and putting things on a piece of cardboard or whatever. And I'm just kind of making fun here. But if you thought about this conceptually, what are some ways, how do we do vision or action boards in STEM? And I'm going to give you some of the things that I've done, but I thought I'd give you a couple minutes to maybe go to the Jamboard and see if you can come up with some ideas there. And I'm seeing one appeared already, Gantt charts. That's a perfect one. That's something that engineers love, Gantt charts. And I have to admit that when an engineer first presented a Gantt chart to me, I went, what are you doing? But I love them now and use them all the time. So that's a really good example of how we do vision boards in the STEM disciplines. Anybody have any other ideas? Timelines. Yep. We like to create timelines and put a whole bunch of things on those timelines. It's another kind of graphical representation of a vision board as opposed to using images. Any other ones? All right. We've got collaborate. We've got mind maps. Oh yeah, I love mind maps. Those are very cool. The Kellogg logic model, another one, very good. Okay, yeah, this is great. Yeah, conceptual frameworks are really good. Word clouds, love that. Long and short-term incentives, excellent. All of those are really, SWOT analysis. Oh yeah, I love the SWOT analysis. That's something that administrators really like to do. Simple Excel sheets. Yep, Excel spreadsheets are brilliant. Whiteboard diagrams. Yeah, I remember a conversation I had with a graduate student one time where he was telling me that he'd been at a party and they were everybody was sitting around having a beer, and they got an idea for a project, and they started writing in marker on the sliding glass door in his apartment. So I thought that was kind of fun. Flowcharts, another really good one that we like to use. Okay, so you can see that we have some in the STEM disciplines, we have some mechanisms for really thinking about what we're doing and maybe planning and doing that for, especially for our actual experiments and what we're doing within the context of a particular project. So I was going to just walk through a few, and I'm going to give you some examples here that I've done for myself and with others in that idea of how do we plan and how do we create a vision or a plan, and also action with it. Annual manuscript goals list. I'm going to show you what this looks like. Annual goals meetings. I do this with my students every year. Teaching plans, proposal development goals, individual development plans, skills and self-assessment. Those are all things that I've done either for myself or for others individually or in groups. And really, when you think about these collectively, what you're really doing is, if you do it and you do all of these things, maybe they all really constitute a 5-year plan. And we talk about a 5-year plan for at least one reason is that in general, most of the time, especially junior faculty, you've got 5 years and then you come up for tenure and promotion in your 6th year. And so creating a 5-year plan is generally a really good way to make that major milestone really happen. So with that, I'm going to just show you some of these things, what they look like. This is just an example of the annual manuscript. This was the Fisher Group papers that were to be submitted in 2020. And again, I don't want anybody to spend any time looking at this or making any judgments about the fact that my group and I actually said, we're going to submit 16 papers in 2020. You can see we clearly did not do that, but we did manage to get 6 papers out the door. And the thing that I've done this for at least for about 25 years, I've been doing this with my group, where we set out at the beginning of the year and we actually sit down and say, these are the papers we'd like to write. And some of them are just conceptual at the beginning of the year. But by the end of the year, and then we go through this and we look back at them at various times throughout the year and then regroup at the end of the year. The real take homes that I want to take from this is that these are goals that have been clearly articulated, and while they're ambitious, they still are goals. We regularly revisit them and we revise them as we go through the year. There's a bit of accountability and transparency here. This is an exercise I go through with my entire research group. It isn't just me saying you're going to do this, but it's the students themselves saying, okay, I'm halfway through this manuscript. I really want to get this one done. I think I'll be able to collect all the data for that one, or whatever it is, right? We also spend a lot of time celebrating achievement. It's really great when we get to actually say what we've done here. And just to also, I didn't mention this, but the ETS, if you didn't guess, was the estimated time of submission. And then the ATS is the actual time of submission. And so you can see that we didn't always hit our goals and didn't even come close in some cases for when the papers got submitted. But whenever they did get submitted, we definitely took a moment to celebrate that accomplishment. And the other thing I'll just say is that having something like this is a tool that also helps to impact progress and the success of everyone within a research group. Might not be the right tool for somebody else to use, but I think that starting to think about these things can help you put together the pieces of a 5-year plan. And I'm going to give you a couple other ones. So everything we do has to do with the balancing everything that we have to do with the amount of time that's available. And often the list of things we have to do just continues to grow, but I have not figured out the space-time continuum yet, because the amount of time that I have available doesn't really change a whole lot. Sometimes it does if you're if you, for example, have children that are growing up and doing at different stages, you might have different time available because you're doing more or less childcare at different times. But overall, the total amount of time available for everything you have to do doesn't change. So I think one piece of advice that I would give, especially to junior faculty, is being strategic about your teaching assignments and being proactive about asking to do that, so that it minimizes the amount of time that and effort you have to put into teaching, especially within that first probationary period, the first 5 years. Enlisting senior faculty as allies can also be beneficial. And again, I'm going to show you what this looked like. This was something that I have to admit, I was not successful at doing this. I didn't even think about doing this when I was an assistant professor. And I ended up with about, I think, 6 or 7 different new course preps during the first 5 years that I was an assistant professor, when I was an assistant professor. But then someone pointed out to me that in the Department of Chemistry at CSU, the senior colleagues had actually gotten together in each of the areas and said, you know, there are certain courses that everybody likes to teach. So we are on a three-time rotation. So for example, there were a bunch of people who like to teach quantum mechanics. And so they said, okay, you get to teach it 3 times, and then you have to rotate to another faculty member. And so what that did for the junior faculty members is that it made it really nice that they could claim a course that they could get to teach 3 times before they would have to teach it or rotate it off. And we also gave our junior faculty 1 semester off in their first year from teaching and 1 semester off in the year before they came up for tenure and promotion. So overall, if you looked at this strategically, in that first 5 years, there were 8 semesters that you were going to have to teach. The standard teaching load was 1 course per semester. And so what I've done up here is just sort of put what would be the ideal teaching load for a physical chemist in that department. They come in the first semester, they teach graduate quantum mechanics, and then they're off from teaching in the spring. Then the next fall, they're teaching the same course, so they're minimizing their course preps. And then in the spring, they would be teaching an undergraduate PChem class. And then again, in their 3rd year, it looks identical. In the 4th year, we liked everybody to have taught a freshman level chemistry course, so teaching Chem 111, and then again, teaching the same course in the spring, and then teaching Chem 111 again. And ultimately, in that first 5 years, there's only 3 new course preps. And now I realize that in different departments, the teaching load, the course load is very different or can be very different. But I use this as an example to show how if you think about something strategically, potentially enlist senior faculty as allies and be proactive about saying, this is what I want to teach. I also want to do this for the reason that I want to really be focused on tenure and promotion, which requires me to balance my time in a reasonable way, that you might be able to minimize the effort that you need to put in, especially on that the new preparation, because that always takes so much more time. When I'm teaching a new class, it probably takes me at least 5 or 6 hours for every hour that I put into the classroom, classroom time that I'm spending. So think about things like that as a way to help to visualize what your 5-year plan is, or how your 5-year plan could look simply with respect to teaching. Proposal development goals. This is another thing I've helped faculty do. And again, this one is very early career investigator focused. And the general recommendation here is that you consider all the different types of sources of funding that might be available to you. Set up a schedule based on annual deadlines for those opportunities, the available writing time that you have, if you need preliminary data, whatever those considerations are. And then also considering what the collaborations are and the relative return on the investment. And one of my senior colleagues used to always talk about how much time it took him to prepare a proposal. And then he would divide that by or take the amount of money he was asking for and divide it by the number of hours it took, so he could get what his cost was, what his time was worth putting together that proposal. So that's one way to think about it. I don't always recommend that. I don't think it's necessarily a one-for-one on things like that, but it's something to think about. So I've put a table in here. I made this up, but I did go and look up, again, the American Chemical Society Petroleum Research Foundation is just one. It's a one funding agency that I know has early career investigator grants. They call them DNI, which is Doctoral New Investigator Awards. They have an annual window. I think they have 2 windows per year. The next window is in September to October of this year. It's for $110,000 over 2 years. There's virtually no overhead. You really don't need a whole lot. You don't need a whole lot of preliminary data to put in one of these proposals. And you don't have to have any collaborators. In fact, it's really to try to help jumpstart new investigators. So think about that versus the time and effort and energy it would take to put together an NSF career grant, which is a much more complex type of proposal with preliminary data and an education plan that is needed for that. You get a lot more money out of it, but you're going to be better off maybe holding off on that one for a couple of years. So thinking about the 5-year plan, you're not going to put that one necessarily in your first year. Keck Foundation is another type of opportunity. You can get up to $1 million for a Keck Foundation award, and there's 3 different cycles per year, but it's a multi-step process, and it's got a very unique focus with a high risk, high reward kind of a payoff. I'm using these all as just examples of how you might be thinking about what are the proposals that I want to be able to put out there, maybe in those first 5 years. And maybe you say about the Keck Foundation, yeah, that's maybe not one that I really want to do in my first 5 years, unless there's a really great idea that you come up with. It also, I'm going to throw in there that our Faculty Research Development Office, the FRDO, really needs to be engaged in that one, as does our corporate and foundation relations folks through the foundation. So they're going to be really helpful. So that one's going to require a lot of coordination and collaboration. Might not be one you want to, what the return on that investment in your first 5 years might not be what you want to be spending your time on. It might be, but that's the kind of thing you need to be thinking about in putting together a set of proposal development goals. And I put the last one on here. There are several different internal seed grant programs. I didn't put any specific ones on there, but these generally tend to be about 5,000 to 25,000. Those can be really useful for you to go after, especially in your first few years, because although they might not have a huge amount of money, they tend also not to have be very long. Maybe they're only 2 or 3 or 4 pages in terms of what you have to submit. So they're not going to cost you a lot of your writing time in order to be able to go after something like that. The bottom line on proposals is that it's very true that they probably are not going to give you the money if you don't ask for it, if you don't write the proposal and submit it. So something to keep in mind. Okay. The individual development plans, this is something that has become very popular with graduate students, but I'm going to say they're not just for students. And really, when we talk about a 5-year plan, that's really what we're talking about. This is an individual development plan for faculty. And I was going to strongly recommend that it's a 5-year plan, to really think about it as a 5-year plan. So the next couple of slides are about IDPs, and some of the language on there is stuff that we might be talking to our students about, but I think it's also important for us to think about how to do that for ourselves as well. And so I think that these are really good tools to take ownership of your career, allow you to pause and reflect and think about what those longer term goals might be, but also think intentionally about the short-term goals, midterm goals, and long-term goals. And the other key here is being able to identify and use resources to achieve your goals. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do, and we're about to do an interactive, an exercise I'm going to have you do again with one of the handouts that was in the chat. First is to do an assessment, and I'm going to say that, again, to sort of tie it in with the theme of the vision board, thinking about what your skills, values, interests, and resources are. I think that thinking the things that could go on your vision board are resources or support that you have or that you might want to get. So this could include various people. It could be about collaborators or career or writing centers, grants and partnerships that you might want to try to develop or go after, instrumentation and infrastructure. What are the resources or support that you need to be able to achieve your goals? What are the potential barriers? I mentioned this earlier with respect to the vision boards. We don't always put those on the vision boards, but I think you need to be thinking about and planning for those. I also strongly recommend having a wellness plan. So making sure, success is tightly linked to wellness. There's been lots and lots of studies about that, and making sure that you're doing something to tend to your wellness in a way that is actually going to be effective for you. And then lastly, the competencies piece. What skills do you have or need And this is part of the homework for today. So what I'm going to say is that if I go to the next slide, I think I'm going to have us pause here. So in the chat, and it also I think was circulated prior to today's session, that there's one of the handouts is a self-assessment exercise. And there are items in there that are roughly categorized by things like research skills or mentoring skills or teaching skills. Don't pay so much attention to those categories, except in the fact that we want you to sort of be doing this assessment where you're using the entire scale within that section. So you're trying to decide within that section, which skills do you have, are you really good at, which ones do you maybe need some work on, and rate yourself on those skills. And then move to another category and do the same thing where you're using the entire scale so that you can prioritize where there are skills that perhaps you need to work on. And then we can talk about how do you bolster those places where you have some gaps in your skills. It's not meant to be a comprehensive list. This is just an assessment that tool that was actually developed by University of Missouri Health Sciences Center, Health Center, I think is where I got this from. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes. I'm sort of babbling around here, but I also want to say that I'm going to move from this slide to the next slide, which is at the bottom of that a self-assessment. There were some questions that are sort of reflection questions about this exercise, about how challenging was it, or what surprised you the most, what skills would best assist you right now. Were you able to identify UNM resources that could help? And were you able to identify action items for skills development? So specific action you can take. So then if you go to the Jamboard, on the second page of the Jamboard, there's a place for you to post things up there that, if you think about it with respect to responding to these reflection questions, if you want to just put things up there. I'm gonna go silent here for another maybe about 5, 7, 10 minutes, something like that, and give you all a chance to work it out. And when I start to see a bunch of stuff appearing on the Jamboard, I will know that you guys have actually completed this assessment. Stop here. And I'm going to just say that I'm reading all the notes that are on here, and it makes me a little sad, some of them, and I don't know. Hopefully, we'll end on a happier note. We'll come out of this. The reason that I think it's important to think about the self-assessment is not to have everybody rating themselves with ones, that just or fives, or to really think about the numerical scores. It's more about, are there things that I need? Are there skills that I need to be developing? And then the next step of that is not to just go, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to do that, but to then figure out what's the plan for doing it. And while right now may not be the greatest time to be thinking about it, I know we're headed to the end of the semester, and it's unclear what's going on with respect to the COVID, and whether or not we're going to be back in the labs full time, or what's going to happen over the summer, what's going to happen in the fall. But I also think that that if you take a little bit of time at certain points to say, okay, not only am I going to identify this, but I'm also going to come up with an action plan to figure out how it's going to happen. It may not be today or tomorrow or next week, but at some point we may be able to do that. And the other piece of this is to also say, can you identify the resources at UNM that might be able to help you? And again, I've only been here for going on 7 weeks now, but I know that there are some resources, and we're working in our office to help to try to improve and to decrease some of the administrative burden, which I noted in a couple of these notes as well. So, okay. So let's set the self-assessment check sheet there for aside for a moment, and kind of move on to thinking about why you need a 5-year plan. I've covered a lot of this already in terms of defining a research vision, developing the ability to realistically gauge the time required for the activities and goals that you might have, identifying the gaps in knowledge and skills. We just were kind of doing that a little bit. But also maybe identifying collaborators or partners that would have the skills. So I saw a couple of people saying, I don't have the methodological skills that I need. Maybe there's some places that you can create partnerships to do that. The last one here, though, I'm going to also point out, and there's a couple of notes that I think also spoke to this, and I am notoriously bad at saying no, but I think this is something that we all need to be practicing on a regular basis as well, because saying no, there's a skill to saying no. And I think that we all need to develop that skill a little bit. And so I had a friend who used to say, I'm practicing saying no by saying it every day. Things to think about there are saying, am I getting sidetracked by every opportunity that comes my way? Maybe that's the place where the vision board could come in, or the 5-year plan comes in to help you decide, okay, I'm not going to go after that opportunity because it's not part of my plan. I think that sometimes you say, I am going to go after that opportunity, even though it's not on my vision board or on my 5-year plan, because it's the right thing to do in the moment. But I think you do need to think about, does it fit with what you want to do? And the other side of that is, can I say no? And how do I say no? And developing skills to be able to do that. And understanding that we all lost time and focus this year, that I'm hopeful that we can maybe get back onto a track that allows us to ramp back up and get the productivity back up, which really helps you think about what you're doing and maybe a little bit more positive outlook. So what to include in your 5-year plan. Obviously, things that you need to do for your that are part of your actual mission at the university: teaching, research, service, but also thinking about funding, publications, developing a network. That can be really important to develop a professional network. What you want to do with students. Are you interested in having graduate students and undergraduate doing research with you? What does that look like? How do you go about recruiting those students? And then wellness. I'm going to say that probably several times. I think wellness is really, really important. And a lot of you commented on the self-assessment reflections that that's a challenge, is to be thinking about what you're doing for yourself as opposed to what you're doing for everyone else. But I'm going to just encourage you to do that. And again, I'm going to raise my hand and say, I am no poster child for the wellness piece of things, but I'm working on it, and I am continuing to get better at both saying no and saying yes to things that are actually in my own self-interest. So I think that's important. So how do you get started on your 5-year plan? This really is, speaks to the second document. So first is to do that self-assessment, to think about that, but don't place a whole lot of weight on individual things. It's supposed to be a guide for you. Then there's a worksheet. This is the second document that's in the chat, and I'm going to walk through a couple of examples with that. But then I think it's also important to think about reviewing your 5-year plan with mentors or peers or other people, acknowledging that you should be doing this with a safe, knowledgeable audience. And so, don't be mindful about who you select to help you think about your 5-year plan, but also think broadly. There are, again, lots of resources. The folks in the Faculty Research Development Office can really help, especially with that proposal development side of things, or funding perspectives, finding opportunities to help you along the way with that. The advanced group is another great resource. I know they've got a lot of different resources there, and they've created a few programs that I think are really important. I think the one that I like the most is the Shut Up and Write. We had at CSU, we had Show Up and Write, but the Shut Up and Write, I think I like a little bit better. But also external colleagues. So if you have people at other institutions that can also help you develop that 5-year plan and review it, I think that's really a good thing to do. And then do an annual update. And so that idea that this is a 5-year plan is really important, but things change over 5 years. And if you're involved in research and scholarship, you know that things don't always go as planned. And sometimes you find you get a really great idea for a new research question to be asking. and you want to pursue that. And so clearly that's going to change. So being able to do things on an annual basis and review what you've said you're going to do over the year. And I always think about my publications list. And while it's always ambitious, what you didn't see in what I showed you earlier is that not all the papers that were on that at the end of the year, or even some of the ones that we actually submitted, were ones that were actually that we thought of at the beginning of the year. So there was this, things change. And in the course of a year, instead of going after one publication, the experiments took us in a completely different direction, and we ended up with a completely different manuscript that got submitted in last year. So I think those are things to keep in mind. So it's important to not only review it, do an annual update, but adjust your goals, and also think about why a goal was met or unmet. So if I didn't submit a manuscript that I really thought was going to go out in the first quarter of the year, I can sit down and go, okay, let me think about that. Why didn't it go out? And I say, oh, that's right, because I ended up focusing on this other manuscript, or because I spent my writing time writing a proposal instead of writing a manuscript. So thinking about that and letting yourself off the hook, especially, I think COVID-19 can be our reason why for a very long time to come, is that there are some impacts that we are going to be seeing for a very long time. And I think it's really going to impact productivity, not just over the past year, but I think for the next year or so to come. And so thinking about what can I be doing to maybe start to ramp that back up without beating myself up over it. Okay. So if you look at that document, we're not going to have you fill that out today. It's something just a tool for you to use. I think it's a reasonable exercise. I myself get bogged down sometimes when I get asked, oh, fill this out and write all these things down. I have to enter all the boxes and check things. I don't want you to get bogged down with this either. I think it's just a tool for you to start to think about what's important for my 5-year plan. Can I actually formulate some goals in different areas and so forth? So the first part of that helping you to develop 5-year plan is basically identifying your overall goals. Maybe it's to get tenure and promotion. Maybe it's to get promoted to full professor, whatever your goals are. But then also thinking about where you're spending your time. How is it allocated? How is your time allocated based on what it says, like in your offer letter or on your annual evaluation? But then think about, how do you actually spend your time? So you maybe say, oh, I have 10% allocated to my service, but I'm actually spending 50% of my time on service. So then you have to think about, okay, how can you shift that to have those be more in line, but also what's your ideal allocation of time, and understanding that we don't have that much flexibility sometimes in how we can shift our time. That may not be something that you have a whole lot of control over right now, but thinking about how are you supposed to be spending your time, and how are you actually spending your time, and how would you like to be spending your time are really nice exercises to go through, I think. The second part has you identifying vision, milestones, and resources for the 3 different parts of our integrated mission. And you can add others as needed, but basically for research, there's these overall questions about what's your vision, what do you want to be known for with respect to your research and scholarship? What are some short-term milestones you need to hit to get there? What resources do you need? How do you build your network to, again, just get those juices flowing about that? With teaching, things like, who are you as a teacher? What are your goals in the classroom? What do you need to help develop your teaching and mentoring skills? And service, same way. What are your goals at each level? Departmental, college, university? How do you ensure that service does not overshadow your research and scholarship? Because that's often what I find that happens, is you get really interested in doing something on the service end of things, and then it takes away from your teaching and your research. And then again, I'm going to come back to this again. What do you say no to, and what are the strategies for doing so? And I can give you some that I've used that tend to work fairly well. Clarifying your goals. I think this is also really important. This is another little thing that people talk about doing. And again, I used to sort of say, I don't know if that's that important. And then I actually went through the exercise with some of my students who were doing individual development plans as part of a requirement for a class. And I found I actually was doing it for goals that I had myself. So I think these are important to think about at any stage of your career. So I actually did one here to show you how this works. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, or relevant. I've heard both of those. and timely. And so just as an example, I can say, well, my initial goal is I want to publish my research. That's a great goal. I really want to do that. But it's really vague. So if we just walk through this, if I wanted to make it more specific, I could say, I want to publish my research in the top peer-reviewed journal in my field. So that makes it very specific. I can say, to make it measurable, I want to publish 20 journal articles on my research in the top peer-reviewed journal in my field. I then go to achievable. Is that achievable? 20 publications, especially pre-tenure, may not be achievable, probably not be achievable. So then maybe I adjust that and say, okay, I'm going to publish 10 journal articles, and that becomes a little bit more achievable. It's important that these things be achievable. The R stands for realistic or relevant. And so realistic is to say, I want to publish 10 journal articles, 3 of which are in the top peer-reviewed journal in my field. So I'm not aiming to get all of my research into that journal, just three publications into that journal. So that becomes, again, more realistic. It's also relevant because publishing is going to be important for me to get tenure and promotion. And then the last one is I'm going to make it timely. So I'm going to publish 10 journal articles, 3 in the top peer-reviewed journal in my field. And then the timepiece is prior to the tenure and promotion decision. So that just walks you through how a specific goal, you can make it a SMART goal by making it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and relevant, and then also timely. So the last Jamboard page I think that I had up here was to do just that. And I've put that specific goal that I just wrote on this slide, I put that up there to help. And I just thought if you guys want to, again, I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes here to see if you can come up with a good SMART goal that you'd like to share on the Jamboard. And specifically a SMART goal for your research and scholarship. Start to pop up, keep adding to these. These are great. And I think that some of the things I really like about this, the ones that I submit 3 grant proposals this year. I think that it is a SMART goal. It's specific. It is measurable. It is timely. It's relevant. This one, submit 2 NSF proposals, one of which is a collaborative proposal before the end of 2021. Again, there's lots of specificity in there. It's measurable. It's attainable. Graduate 3 master's students prior to the T&P decision. I like that one too. Publish 3 research articles in my second line of research based upon data collected from a UNM IRB approved research study prior to the submission of my P&T dossier. Nice. Remake all 8 homeworks for fall course before fall classes start. Again, love that. That's really, really nice. Good, smart, achievable goals. Again, more around apply for 2 grants as PI in the first year with goal of obtaining 1 to start implementation next year. And then also have 2 more where you're the co-PI or collaborator. Nice. Submit 1 NIH grant for the October deadline. Help 2 of my students complete their master's degrees by the end of the summer. Nice. Any other ones that people want to throw up there? Start riding mountain bike again before the fall semester starts. Love that. That's a really great wellness goal. And it'll probably help you if you get out on your mountain bike to have some great ideas, solve problems in your research and so forth. I think that's a great one. Finish one sole author publication in top journal before T&P decision. Prepare a response template for every new service and committee requests that I received this year. Yes. And again, I think that, I'll give you a tip as people are putting some more up there. This is one of the things that I learned when I was an assistant professor, that I had a senior faculty colleague who told me, he said, okay, here's what you're going to do, Ellen, is when people are going to come to you and they're going to want you to be on their committee and they're going to want you to do various things. He said, you are not allowed to say yes to anything before you talk to me. And I said, oh, come on, Chuck. That's silly. You're telling me that I can't say yes to anything until I talk. I'm going to just say, I'm sorry, I have to talk to Chuck about this. And he said, yes, that's exactly what I want you to do. And the really kind of cool thing about this is I didn't have to do it too many times before I figured out that what he was doing was actually trying to help me protect my time, because the few times that I did actually say, I can't do this, and I can't do this, I can't give you an answer until I talk to Chuck, is that but one, it was giving me time to think about if this was something I really wanted to do. The second thing was that when I did talk to Chuck about it, he would say to me, okay, this is a really important committee for you to be on. It's going to be really good for you to do, blah, 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 for the following reasons. Or he would say, this is just going to suck up all your time and it's really not worth you doing it. And the other thing that it did for me was it allowed me then to go back to whoever had asked me to do something and say, you know what, I talked to Chuck and Chuck really thinks that this is not where I should be spending my time right now. And he's happy to talk to you about it if you have a problem with that. So now that's a really great, this was a very senior colleague that I had a lot of, clout that could actually help protect me. But it also taught me that there are ways of saying no to things that are actually quite respectful and can be done without losing any ground politically. One of the things I started doing and then decided it probably wasn't the best thing to do, but it did give me some interesting information, is that there weren't very many women when I started at CSU. And so often I would be asked to be on a committee or something simply because I was a woman. But that's something that's hard to actually figure out these days because people aren't going to say that effectively. But I did ask someone once, can you tell me why exactly is it that you want me to be on this committee? Is there something that I especially bring to this committee that other people might not bring? And ultimately what the answer that came back to me was effectively boiled down to the fact that I was a woman and they needed to diversify the committee. So it was interesting to actually force somebody to say that. And I didn't actually say, is it because I'm a woman? I asked very politely to explain what it was in my background or my experience or my expertise that they thought would be particularly useful on the committee. And that's actually useful information sometimes, especially when you do have expertise that can be lent to a particular activity. So that's a couple hints on how to say no. And I've got more strategies in that if you need them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but again, there's tables in the worksheet that have you go, and this is just some examples of how to fill those out. What's the area? There may be a really large goal, and then there are other smaller actions underneath those goals that you can take to help you achieve it within that time frame. And you'll note here that if you look at the far right column, the time frame that you've got over here, like, let's say you want to get funding from a federal agency in the next 18 months. You might want to attend a grant writing workshop, meet with a program officer, and then submit your career proposal next summer. Those tend to be, the deadlines for those tend to be in July, June, July, August in the summer. And so there's a time frame here that might help you achieve it. So breaking it down into smaller goals, and it includes things like, the various pieces, but on a reasonable time frame. Course preparation, that's another one in terms of your teaching. You might want to, I need to prepare for spring 22. And I made these up. So you might think about meet with others who have taught the course. This is a new course. You've never taught it before. Develop the course syllabus in the fall. And then I have in here, prepare the first 3 to 4 weeks of the course materials during winter break. But I'm also going to say, I also said this to myself, oh my gosh, think about that. You're not giving yourself the break that you need if you do that. So maybe that's a goal that you want to rethink what the timeline is, or maybe how long it should take you to achieve that goal. Again, I also put in here service and things like wanting to engage in professional society governance. That's a great goal. It helps you expand your network. I'm not so sure it's going to get you tenure and promotion. So if you're still in that phase, you might want to think about that as a much longer term goal. I have things starting here summer of 2022, but as I look at it and think about how my goals intertwine, maybe that's something I put off till the summer of 2023, or maybe not till 2024 or whatever. So you see how this goes. And again, I'm just giving you this as an example. That being said, a couple of additional notes. I've already talked about some of these. Cross-check your goals with your identified skills gap from the self-assessment. Figure out how they intersect with each other. Maybe there are ways you can prioritize and or combine them so that you are actually maximizing your efficacy. Again, I'm going to say it for about the fourth or fifth time. Make sure you include wellness goals, things about your family, your health, all those things that make you happy outside of your career. Consider what obstacles might exist. Make sure you plan for those. Definitely think about reviewing and revising, and remember that some goals may always be aspirational. I have that huge list of publications that I'd like to get out there. I will tell you, I've never submitted all of the papers that are on that list at the beginning of the year. It just never happens. But for me, and the way that my mind works, I love having aspirational goals and being able to say, okay, I maybe didn't achieve all of those, but it keeps me focused on how do I do the next one? How do I do the next one? So that you need to find what works for you in terms of that. So I'm about to wrap up and give us some time for Q&A. I'm happy to answer questions here. So once you've completed the writing down of the goals and the action items and the timelines, et cetera, and then think about, do I really want to create a vision board that you might hang up by your desk so that you can see it every day and remind yourself of it? I'm going to say this, that first off, maybe try to keep your vision board to just what you're going to do in a particular calendar year or academic year. Are there images that fit the goals that you've put down on paper? Can you create other graphics or visual aids that might help you? And lastly, I love this question because it's really what's always in my mind. Do you really still just hate the idea of a vision board? And I'm going to say, I maybe do, but I'm starting to come around to the idea that maybe I actually need a physical thing hanging on my board that reminds me. So to that end, I thought about what I would do, because since I just started at UNM, and there are some things that I still need to achieve from a research standpoint. I still have a couple graduate students that one of them whom is going to graduate this year with their PhD. I want to make sure I spend some time reading and doing those kinds of things. And then in the context of my job as the VPR, things like government relations, I'm really getting into that and trying to figure out what the New Mexico state legislature is like, as well as our federal relations kinds of things. Customer service is top of mind for the whole OVPR operation. We Are One is a new research campaign communications campaign that's coming out. And then I am the program chair for the December 2022 PAC Surf meeting. That was, it was supposed to be held in December of 2020. And so there's a lot of planning that we're going to be doing in the next year to 2 years, next 18 months or so, to get ready for that meeting. And I'm also thinking about other things like different and creative measures of success. This is by no means a complete vision board for myself. I just wanted to sort of throw this out there as saying, I can do it too. I can create a vision board that maybe encapsulates some of these things. And with that, I'm going to do two things. One is I'm going to open it up for Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing. But another thing that I like to do is, if you think about for today and this this kind of a workshop, if you can think of one word that might describe what you experienced here, and hopefully you don't all walk away feeling like crap because of the self-assessment thing that I asked you to do, and hopefully there's a little bit more positive and you're going to come up with an action item. So if you want to think about a powerful word, you can either put it on the Jamboard or put it in the chat. And then with that, I believe I'm going to stop here and say we have a little bit of time for questions, and I am happy to take those questions. I'm going to stop sharing, but I also want to point out that if you have anything you want to talk to me about, I'm open please send me an email or contact me in some way. So with that, I don't know if we can take questions if people want to put questions in the chat. Other things, Julia.
We will do whatever, yeah, put questions in the chat, do the hand raise on the participant list, speak right up if you'd like to. We can't quite see everyone on the screen. Maybe we can now.
Yeah, and I want to just also point out again that I'm really going to emphasize that I totally get that feeling tired and discouraged is absolutely where we all are right now. And again, as I said earlier, I know we're coming up on the end of the semester, and this is always a hard time of the year. I hate the month of April because everything happens in April. So please don't walk away thinking that I'm trying to get you to do something right now that seems overwhelming, and do it at your own pace. These tools are just meant to be that. They're tools that you can use on your own. And if they're helpful, great. If they're not, okay, that's fine. I will also point out we've got several of our FRDO folks are on the line, and I know that they're super happy to help with any of this stuff as well. So.
Any questions at this point? Please feel free to speak up. While you're thinking about this, I will say, if some of this self-assessment and thinking about help you need gives you ideas about workshops we should be working on, either advance or advance with the research office, please let me know, because we always start working on them, right about now, despite the fact that we don't have any energy either. So if you've got suggestions, please let us know.
And by the way, the other thing that I want to say, because there were a couple people who said, I don't feel like I have any skills at all. I totally feel that way all the time too, that I don't have any skills, but all of you do. So I'm just going to say that too, that all of you have skills, whether you want to recognize them or not. So.
And we've got a question on how would you recommend initiating new collaborations across departments where you don't have connections?
That's a really good question. The first thing I would do probably is, I'm doing this all the time these days because I don't know anybody at UNM, but I tend to ask the people I do know, hey, do you know somebody in this department? So I would start to explore that. Some of your colleagues might know. I think that also thinking about, I know the folks I'm going to keep throwing the FRDO people under the bus here because they know a lot of people because they work all across campus, the advanced folks as well. And so I would start with the really safe contacts and say, hey, I don't know anybody. I'm looking for somebody who does X or Y. And sometimes what that does is it connects you with somebody that may not be exactly the right person, but they can get you to the right person. So I think that that's good. And also ask them, if you do find somebody who knows somebody, ask them if they will make the connection for you, make the introduction for you. Because sometimes it's a little bit easier if somebody says, hey, I want to introduce the two of you, and then you can start the conversation after that has been done. So that's another little piece of advice.
Ellen, can I jump in on that too? Just there's some other opportunities too, things like lightning lounges and, hearing from different people, getting to know some of their work. And then again, talking to FRDO, if you get involved in helping to review for limited competitions, it's a smaller job than like reviewing for a big agency, but you get to learn about some of the really cool things other people are doing too.
Yeah, and Zhigong put into this is good. I should have thought of that. The team research symposium in a couple weeks is another really good place. Things like that where you can go and listen to what other people are saying, and you hear about what their research is about. I think it's another really, really good way to try to make some connections.
And don't just attend Lightning Lounge. Contact me or Mary Jo if you want to present in Lightning Lounge next year as a way to see if you can maybe learn about potential collaborators you might not have thought of.
Yeah, and there's another good tip in the chat that SOE has an expertise directory, which is kind of cool. So.
Last call for questions.
I actually have one.
You always
Ellen?
do. Go for
I
it.
know, I know.
Go ahead.
So in terms of vision boarding, you presented it sort of as an individual activity. Can you do group vision boards?
That is a great question. I think a team vision board would be awesome. I also think that speaking to what's a workshop you could do is to meet with people. This is something that people have done a lot of with students, is to do where you have vision boards where people are putting together their own vision board. But if you're going to do like engineering competitions or things like that, that might be a good exercise to start, to have a team that's going after, one of these like I know like race car development or whatever, those kinds of competitions, to have at the beginning, have a team and put together the vision board, what they think what the process is going to look like and how they're going to get there, what they're going to achieve by the end. So yeah, I think that absolutely you can do that. I also think that's the kind of thing that you could do if you have a writing circle, that you could have everybody, putting together a vision board that's specifically around their writing projects, and do that as a team effort as well. Even though you're still writing individually,
Okay, so let's have a virtual round of applause and thanks for Ellen. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll be sharing the recording on the Advance website and YouTube channel, so that'll be up sometime next week. If you have any trouble finding it or accessing it, let us know. And I think one of the messages here is really there are lots of ways to get support, and if you have identified something you need help with, ask one of us, ask me, ask Mary Jo, ask Monica Fischel, ask Acela Roeder, ask Ellen, and we'll help you figure out, whether or not there is a match between what we've currently got and the help you need, or if there's a way we can work towards it. So please don't hesitate to ask. And I hope everyone has a good weekend, and thank you for attending.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much.